Welcome to Keep the Line Moving Extras, where we take things further. Here we dive deeper into leadership, sports, and business. Each week we highlight our weekly guest, providing further insights from their leadership journey. Beyond the usual headlines, we uncover what truly drives success. From strategic thinking to personal growth, to inspiring teams and leading with purpose. Here we go. KTLM Extras. Let's launch you into your weekend feeling great about something inspirational, something educational, something entertaining, or all of the above. That's what this little podcast is about, to close out your week, right? Today, we're going to talk about the NFLPA Team Report Cards 2025. You saw this come out a couple days ago. The NFL Combine is going down in Indianapolis, Indiana right now. Teams are watching players, interviewing players. They're doing drills, they're throwing, lifting 225 in the weight room. How many times can players do it, right? They're evaluating everything: speed, agility, drills, football. Everything is being talked about for the prospects in the upcoming NFL draft in April. However, this report card is very important, and people are talking about it as well. Why? Because it dives into the culture, the details of what makes organizations win. Let's compare this. Look at this. You have film, right? So a coach will spend 8 hours looking at their upcoming opponent for tendencies, watching the same play for over an hour. Fast forward, rewind, looking to the how does the receiver come off the line of scrimmage? What can we pick up? What can we do? Then on game day, you don't know the variables. You don't know the defense, how they're going to shift, who's going to cover the receiver. My point is, why do they watch the film? To get a competitive edge. And that's what I think this survey is. It's anything you can get to have a competitive edge. Nearly 1,700 players were asked from the months of August to November this past season on the following criteria. What is the family room like? The head coach, ownership, the strength coaches, the weight room, team facilities, meaning the locker room. What are some other? Food, dining area, nutritionists, training room, training staff. There's all different criteria, and each team from the player feedback would receive grades. And let's look at some of the teams that did very well. Number one, let's look at the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell, the head coach, received an A+, the team's highest graded area for the second year in a row. When asked what the team does best, the players' resounding answers were culture and leadership. We talk about this all the time on the podcast, as you know. The players also said Dan Campbell is efficient with their time. He's one of 6 coaches across the league to receive a perfect score from the players. Players feel that Campbell is highly receptive to locker room feedback on the team's needs. Let's look at another team, the Kansas City Chiefs. Head coach Andy Reid got an A+. Players feel that Reid is highly receptive to locker room feedback on the team's needs. The Vikings, they were number 2 in the rankings this year, right? And how does all this translate to wins and losses? Let's hold on a second before we get to the Vikings. First, for the Lions, how many games did they win this year? Well, let's try 15, right? And they made the playoffs. How about the Kansas City Chiefs? Well, they made their 3rd straight Super Bowl. How many games did they win this year? Let's try 15, okay? So it's not just the X's and O's that we talk about all the time. It's listening to players' needs and every advantage, creating an atmosphere conducive to winning. Now, let's go to the Vikings. By the way, the Vikings won 14 games. What did they say? Well, when asked what their team does best, players overwhelmingly praise how the organization cares for them and their families. Cares for them and their families. The Vikings have been the gold standard when it comes to treatment of families since the inception of these report cards, which was 3 years ago. So the Vikings players are asked about their organization, and they give high grades to their head coach, Kevin O'Connell, who got an A+, by the way, and he is efficient with their time. Players feel O'Connell is highly receptive to locker room feedback and the team's needs. Now, of course, they won 14 games. They did it with Sam Darnold. No disrespect to Sam, but he was not the projected starter when the season started. He came in, did a great job. It can be argued because of the atmosphere that he played in with Kevin O'Connell specializing in quarterbacks, but also the organization that cares for their team and their families. That's what we talk about all the time on this podcast, that these details, albeit not directly correlated to the X's and O's on the field, are what culture is and how teams are able to win by caring for their employees. Their number one stakeholder are the players. Yes, there are coaches, there are front office, there are scouts, there's the GM, there's ownership, but the players are arguably the number one stakeholders in this whole equation, right? And if they feel cared for, it's one less thing they have to worry about. So you look up and down these grades here, and there's grades varying obviously from A to F on how they take care of their families, right? On game day. You would think, okay, what's the big deal? Come into the game, go to your seats. No, there's a lot of coordination with families. And again, these are first world problems. There's a lot going on in our world today that need more attention than this, but this is really interesting because of the popularity of the NFL and people trying to figure out why their teams, the fans trying to figure out why the one team wins, one team doesn't. And it's not just head coach and quarterback, it's all these other things as well as the head coach, quarterback, and the talented roster. It's culture, and we talk about it all the time. And so the player walks into the stadium on game day. If they know their family is taken care of, there's proper seating, there's proper, access to food and access in and out of their vehicles and things of that nature, it's one less worry. So the player can focus on what his job is, which is to be a great teammate and perform on the field. Then you take it to the practice, right? So the coach says, hypothetically, let's just play this out. The coach says, all right, give it everything you got. This is the end of a practice on any given day, right? Give it everything you have. Be there for your teammates. We have a high standard. We play for each other. And then all of a sudden you walk into the weight room because some of the weight room grades are low and you see a dumbbell from 1958. I'm exaggerating to make a point. Or the weight room is organized in a way that doesn't make sense to the players, right? Or there's size issues. And I get it. These things cost a lot of money. But again, it's one less thing the player has to worry about if everything makes sense. And if ownership is saying, hey, we are committed to this, we are committed to that. Well, they have to show it, right? In the team facilities and the details that make up a winning culture. All right. So let's compare this to what happened in baseball last week when Hal Steinbrenner made the facial hair policy change after 50 years. He said, why did he do it after all these years? Because he had been hearing a lot from people over the recent years, from current players, former players. And then he engaged with Brian Cashman, the general manager, and his staff. And then Hal Steinbrenner said, I even listened to some family members and I made an educated decision to make the change. Why? So you're thinking, if you're a Yankee fan, why did they do that? It doesn't lead to wins. But hold on a second. If you have a key free agent that just wants to come to the Yankees and that's what's going on, or the trade deadline, and the Yankees are one of the teams, they're going to make a decision perhaps, or go into the Yankees if it's not something they can make a decision and they're simply traded. It's one less distraction. And anytime as a franchise, baseball or football, you can minimize distractions and amplify amenities or things that mean something to your number one stakeholder, your players, you will have that competitive advantage to win. That's why I think this thing is so important. All right, I want to close it out highlighting two more teams, and then we'll call it a day and send you off on your weekend. And my sources are NFL.com and ESPN. The Washington Commanders, they were ranked 32nd in the past two report cards. They jumped to number 11 in their second year since the ownership group headed by Josh Harris acquired the team from Dan Snyder. Players still cited concerns about their aging locker room and practice facility, but team grades for treatment of families, food and dining, and head coach surged. Here's what JC Treader said about the Commanders. Quote, what's impressive about that is really shows the point of this project. where if you take the Commanders facility, it's still the same facility, J.C. Treader said. Harris didn't knock down the walls. He didn't rebuild it. He didn't do anything. He made changes in staffing. He made changes in what players had been asking for, kind of the softer skills areas of the facility. And he changed the culture there. And you could feel that when you went there and you did a team visit. So you say, the Commanders hired Dan Quinn, and what happened? Well, they went to the NFC Championship game, and they won 12 games. They went 12-5 because of what the players have said mattered to them. They addressed it. Not only that, but they brought in a new head coach and new staffing, and it made a monumental change affecting their wins and losses. And that's what this comes down to. The Chargers are the last team that we'll talk about today. The Chargers made the biggest improvement in the rankings, rising from 30th in 2024 to 5th in 2025. Of course, Jim Harbaugh and his entire staff came in and revamped everything about the Chargers on the football side, with all due respect to Coach Staley, who was there previously. But in the wins and losses, they went from 5-12 to 11-6. Look at what culture does and caring for your players, right? And making a commitment to winning and addressing the categories that we've talked about here today to get the Chargers as the number one team making the biggest improvement in the rankings. And I could speak personally about the Chargers, having spent several weeks with them this fall. On the business side, they're an amazing group of people. Now, this survey didn't pertain to the business side, but I can tell you that their culture is extremely strong. They care about each other, and they're committed to getting better, winning on and off the field. Just wanted to offer that for you from a personal standpoint. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode of KTLM Extras. We'll see you on Tuesday for another great interview. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwhal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.